Hello everyone, this is Teacher Igor. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm super excited to share with you how I nailed the highest score in IELTS reading. I'll be spilling all the secrets and strategies that worked for me, plus some handy tricks to help you ace it too. First, I'll tell you exactly what to expect during the exam day, what it looks like, what it feels like, step by step. And after that, I'm gonna give you 5 preparation tips that can help you increase your score. Sounds good? Let's get started. Let's start with the examination day. So here's what it looks like. After you're done with the listening part of the test, which I'm gonna make a lesson about next week, you won't be able to exit the room. You need to know that there are no breaks between the listening, reading, and writing parts of the test. I can confidently say it to you because I've worked as an invigilator for this exam, and I've taken it as well. If you haven't seen my videos before, here's my IELTS report card where you can see my total score. You can only use the time of the exam itself to go to the bathroom, which is unfortunate for many people. If you're taking a computer-based test, you will have to remain seated in front of your screen. Then the invigilator will give you a form to fill out, and they will also provide you with a piece of paper to take some notes during the exam. You don't really have to use it. And then the examination will start. You will enter the system on your personal computer, the timer will start, and you will begin completing the tasks. There are 3 parts in the reading section of both academic and general IELTS. These parts contain 1 passage each. These passages come from books, news articles, magazines, journals, and so on. There are 40 questions overall, and you are given 60 minutes to complete them. These questions are different for the general and academic versions. And since I've taken the academic one, I think that I'm more qualified to talk about that. By the way, tell me in the comments if you want me to make a video about a full comprehensive guide to IELTS reading, where I will explain all the different types of questions in more depth, and also show some examples from real tests. Tell me if you want to see that. But this video is more about my personal experience. So here are 5 tips that I used to get to Band 9. Tip number 1 is about speed reading. You need to learn how to speed read. Speed reading basically consists of 2 main parts: skimming and scanning. Skimming involves quickly reading the passage. You do it to get the general idea of the content and also the structure of the text. Here, all we need to do is pay attention to the highlighted words, headings, and subheadings. You just need to get familiar with the text. For example, you are given a passage about renewable energy sources. So what you need to do is quickly read the introduction, then the first sentence of each paragraph, and the conclusion. That's all. And while you're reading, you need to take note of the headings like solar energy, wind energy, hydroelectric power, and so on. After you skimmed through the text, move on to scanning. Scanning is all about looking for specific information that you're being asked about. And you need to practice identifying the keywords without reading every single word because you don't have time for that. For example, if a question asks about the advantages of solar energy, scan the text for keywords such as solar energy and advantages. Of course, there is a high chance that they're going to use a synonym for that, but actually in the reading sections, they don't do it that much. So when you find them, read that specific section carefully to find the correct answer. But don't read the whole text. And by the way, if you want to know how to read and skim faster, you can watch a video that I've made about that. Just click the link and I believe that it's going to be helpful to you. Tip number 2 is about improving your vocabulary. I think it's pretty obvious that if you want to succeed in the IELTS test, you need to expand your vocabulary. And the only way to do it is by reading quite a lot and trying to memorize those words and meeting them again and again to see them in context. You can read the news, which is really helpful. You can read some magazines or some online sources about the topics that are interesting to you, but also something that expands your knowledge in different directions. If you're curious enough to look up the meanings of all these individual words, which is something that I did in order to expand my vocabulary, you will see incredible results. This way, you will accumulate a wide range of synonyms, antonyms, and you will be able to paraphrase different sentences more easily. And this will also help you in the speaking part of the test. So, for example, you read an article about climate change. Don't just read it, but also write down the words that you don't know and be curious enough to look it up on Google. Write down words like mitigation, carbon footprint, or sustainable. Then look up their meanings, usage, and context. If it's possible, also practice using them in different sentences so that you can reinforce the learning of these words. And don't read these articles just once. Try to come back to this topic after some time so that you can see these words again. And this is how we learn. Tip number 3 is about understanding the IELTS structure, understanding question types. And don't worry, I'm gonna make a separate video, just like I told you before, about the guide for IELTS reading, where I'm gonna explain all these different types. So, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for it. But to talk about it shortly, you need to know about multiple choice questions, matching headings questions, true, false, not given questions, and so on. And you need to practice at least a little bit each type of these questions, because you need to know what is required and how to approach these questions. Here's an example of a multiple choice question. You can pause the video to read it more in depth, and here you need to identify the correct answer based on this passage. And here's an example of matching headings. Here you have several headings and you need to match each heading to the appropriate paragraph. But we're moving on to number 4. My 4th tip is extremely important. It is about time management. You need to remember that you have only 60 minutes to complete 40 tasks. So you need to spend and allocate your time wisely. You need about 20 minutes per each section. For me, because I know how to speed read and I know how to use skimming and scanning, I was able to cut down the time that I spend on each question to a minimum. Sometimes I finish significantly early, so I have a lot of time to double check my answers. And this is something that you should strive for. Now, some people get stuck. Usually we get stuck if we find the question too difficult, but please don't do it. If you think that it's too difficult for you, move on to the next one. You can always come back to that one. The rule is very simple. Don't spend too long on any one question. But in terms of some practical advice for you, basically you need to start with section 1 because this is the easiest section for the most part. Try not to spend more than 15 minutes over here. Then move to section 2 and try to complete it within 20 minutes. And now you have 25 more minutes to finish section 3, which is usually a bit more difficult because the task here is more academic. But make sure not to spend too long on each question. So, especially in section 3, if you find some questions a bit challenging, don't waste your time trying to find the answer to that. Just move on to the next one, and maybe, if time allows, you can come back to that one. Remember, we're just trying to score as many points as possible. And you getting stuck on each question is not going to help that. I hope you got it. And now let's move on to the last tip. Number 5 is about practice. You need to practice with some real tests. Honestly, there are many practice materials available online these days. If you watch my previous video where I laid out some tips in general, how to tackle the IELTS test. There, I recommended a website which is called IELTS Test Pro. Once again, I'm not sponsored by them, but they have a lot of different kinds of materials, and I think that solving a few of them from different sections and different parts would be really helpful to you. But don't just sit there and give yourself as much time as you want. You need to try to simulate the exam conditions. Use a timer, and also work in a quiet environment. Then after you complete some practice tests, make sure that you note your mistakes, try to group them and see the types of questions that are most challenging to you. Spend more time on that rather than doing this over and over again. So in terms of practice, it's going to look somewhat like this. First of all, go to that website. Then they usually have a timer right there, but I recommend you set your own timer because it's going to be even more stressful and more indicative of the real environment. So set the timer to 60 minutes and try to solve one big practice test. Try to do it without any interruptions. Then take a look at the mistakes that you've made. Then review your incorrect answers, identify the type of tasks that you're struggling with the most, and then start solving individual questions for this type of task. So if you apply all of these tips that I just told you about, you're going to increase your score significantly. And IELTS reading is not going to be such a terrible experience for you. And there you have it. These are the 5 tips that can elevate your score in IELTS reading. I hope this has been helpful, and in the future, like I mentioned before, I'm going to make a full guide to tackle different types of questions that you can come across in IELTS reading. So stay tuned for the next video, where I'm going to share my experience of getting Band 9 in IELTS listening. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I appreciate it a lot. Comment your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers!